You know, for pretty much all of human history, one generation was no better off than the last. Life was stagnant. And then, all of a sudden, something changed. Well, this year's prize in economic sciences was awarded to the people who finally explained what that something was. And trust me, when you see it on a chart, it is absolutely staggering.
Just look at this. For thousands and thousands of years, economic progress was basically a flat line. And then, about 200 years ago, it just goes vertical. This isn't just some line on a graph. This is the story of the modern world. It's probably the single most important economic puzzle of all time. And this year's laureates? They've finally given us the answer.
So, that's the big question, right? Why did humanity spend millennia just stuck in place, only to suddenly, almost overnight, unlock the secret to lasting prosperity? What flipped the switch?
To really get the answer, we have to think of this as a tale of two different worlds. The world before this incredible takeoff, and the world that came after. Now, our answer comes in two parts, from two sets of brilliant laureates. First, you've got economic historian Joel Mokyr. He explains the initial spark, how this whole growth machine was built in the first place. And then we have economists Philippe Aghion and Peter Howitt, and they explain the engine, the physics of how that machine keeps running, day in and day out.
So let's start at the beginning with the spark. How did all of this even get started? For that, we're going to dive into the work of Joel Mokyr.
Mokyr's big question was basically this: what made the Industrial Revolution so different? I mean, history is full of these amazing golden ages, right? Think about Renaissance Italy or the Dutch Golden Age. They all have these incredible bursts of art and science and commerce, but they always fizzle out. The growth never became self-sustaining. So, what made the Industrial Revolution actually stick?
What Mokyr says, it all came down to a specific recipe with three crucial ingredients that had never, ever come together before. First, a totally new kind of knowledge. Second, an army of skilled tinkerers who could actually use it. And third, a society that was finally open to really disruptive change.
Okay, so first, the knowledge. Mokyr makes this really cool distinction. On one hand, you've got prescriptive knowledge. That's the how-to. It's the craftsman's skill, the secret recipe. Then you have propositional knowledge. That's the why, the scientific principles behind everything. For most of history, these two were in totally separate worlds. The blacksmith knew how to forge steel, but he didn't know the metallurgy of why it worked. But during what Mokyr calls the Industrial Enlightenment, these two worlds just collided. For the first time ever, the scientists asking why started talking to the craftsmen who knew how, and that created this powerful, self-reinforcing feedback loop.
Now for the second ingredient, those tinkerers. And this slide shows it perfectly. I mean, big ideas are kind of useless if you don't have skilled people to build them, test them, and make them better. This chart is just brilliant. It shows that the English counties that had a bigger supply of skilled mechanics, we're talking blacksmiths, millwrights, clockmakers, back in the 1790s, were the exact same places where the textile industry absolutely exploded a few decades later. It wasn't just about the big ideas. It was the hands-on skill that turned those ideas into an industrial reality.
And finally, there's that third ingredient, being open to change. I mean, this quote, it says it all, doesn't it? For most of history, new technology wasn't celebrated. It was seen as a threat. Guilds, city councils, you name it. They would actively try to block or even destroy inventions that threatened their way of life. But the Enlightenment helped create what you could call a culture of growth, where progress was finally seen as a good thing. And that new mindset, when you combined it with political systems that could handle the conflict, finally let the disruptive power of technology off the leash.
So Mokyr gives us the blueprint for how this growth machine was first built. That's the spark. But what keeps it running? What's the fuel? For that, we've got to look at the engine.
This is where Philippe Aghion and Peter Howitt come in. They looked at our modern economy, at that smooth upward line of growth we saw at the beginning, and they realized something. It's kind of an illusion. When you zoom in and look at individual companies and industries, it is not smooth at all. It is a constant, chaotic, churning storm.
They gave this whole process a name: creative destruction. And the key idea here is that growth isn't about all the existing companies just getting a little bit better each year. No, it's about new innovations making old stuff and even old companies totally obsolete. The smartphone replaces the flip phone. The streaming service replaces the video store. Progress actually happens when entrepreneurs create new winners by, and this is their phrase, stealing business from the old established firms. And this isn't just some abstract theory. You can see it plain as day in the data. Look at this.
In a typical year in the U.S. economy, more than 1 in 10 businesses will either be brand new or will shut its doors for good. That is a massive amount of churn. That constant cycle of entry and exit, that is the engine of creative destruction at work.
So this completely changes how we should think about growth. The old view was this nice, harmonious idea, a rising tide that lifts all boats. But in Aghion and Howitt's world, growth is much more like a disruptive storm. Yes, it creates incredible wealth and progress, for sure, but it does it by creating winners and losers.
Okay, so we've got the spark that built the machine, and we've got the engine that keeps it running. But why does understanding all of this really matter for us, right here, right now?
So here it is, the complete picture. Mokyr's work on the Industrial Revolution. That gives us the historical blueprint for how this whole growth engine was put together in the first place. Then, Aghion and Howitt's theory of creative destruction gives us the physics of how that very same engine operates in our modern world. Put them together, and you finally have an explanation for the miracle of modern prosperity.
And understanding this machine is more important now than ever. It gives us a framework for thinking about huge technological waves like AI. It helps us figure out how to regulate dominant companies without accidentally killing the very innovation that got us here. And it's a stark reminder that this entire system depends on a culture that supports science, that tolerates disruption, and that rewards the skilled people who turn great ideas into reality. These aren't just dusty old theories. They are practical tools for shaping our future.
Which, of course, leads us to the final big question. This unbelievable engine of progress, it's been running hot for 2 centuries straight, but its future is not guaranteed. Now that we understand how it was built and how it runs, the real question for all of us is, what's it going to take to keep this thing fueled for the next 200 years?